Thank you so much. Okay, so today's topic will be on accepted and commitment training. This article was issued in Behavior Analysis and Practice in August 2020. Next slide. The author of the article is Jonathan Tarbox, Thomas Sabo, and Megan Ackland. So just to say that this is not my research and it's from an article and these are the author, everything's from them. Okay, next slide. All right. So the reason why I chose ACT is that I thought it would be good to share since it's a new, not I wouldn't say new, but I think BCBAs are just more aware of it and finding the need for it. I find that, I don't know why, but my clients have sort of evolved from like intensive challenging behaviors to more like higher functioning individuals who have behavior, but not as extreme as the severe ones. But it's basically a lot of like emotional management, emotional self-management. So because of that, I had to like, okay, so what am I going to use? I think like just, reinforcement contingencies may not be suffice enough because I have to equip them with skills, right? So when it comes to emotion, what technology would be suitable? And so I've heard about ACT, and then I started like exploring it, and now I'm practicing it to some extent, and I have a supervisor. My supervisor is my boss, and she's a psychologist and a certified behavior analyst. So I said to her, I'm not doing this unless you supervise me. So yeah, I'm getting guidance as well with this. But anyways, um, so the background of this is that why ACT emerge is that BCBAs often find themselves addressing complex behavior repertoires in their practice that require more innovating, higher level programming. It is also the BCBA's it is our task to develop effective programs for developing the verbal repertoires of clients and address problematic patterns of behaviors that tend to emerge with the development of those verbal repertoires. So when we teach behavior, a person has that complex repertoire of language, spoken language. With problems, there also is that what do you call it? Like, the verbal behavior can produce internal or private verbal thoughts. Does that make sense? Because like without the
like depression and anxiety, those are part of the downside of having verbal behavior, right?
Self-talk, right? The self-talking, the negative self-talk. Yeah. So you open up the door for verbal behavior, but then also, when they are faced with challenges and traumatic events, those internal verbal repertoires also emerge, that are contradictory to a healthy life. All right, next slide, June. Okay, so we'll talk about the definition and goal of ACT. So acceptance and commitment therapy is a contemporary behavior analytic approach to addressing problematic verbal behavior involved in behavior rigidity and insensitivity to social significant contingencies. The goal of ACT is to increase psychological flexibility, which we'll go through, by engaging in skillful behavior in the presence of negative, challenging, or aversive experience. Um, excuse me. Um, Next one. All right. But before we go to the heart of ACT, which is the psychological flexibility, I want to kind of talk about how ACT had developed first so that we have like a good understanding. Um, so one of the things is that it is an empirically supported treatment. There are evidence that, that it's been researched. From the article, it mentions that since 2015, there has been over 15 meta-analysis of ACT methods that's been published. It's continuing. It's continually to be developed and practiced in both psychotherapeutic or counseling contexts, but also in ABA contexts. So over the years, the initial development of ACT is actually for counseling, but over the years we have started using that outside that context in ABA, like in parent trainings, or even with our kids, or even with ourselves as BCBAs, or even with our therapists. So you can also use ACT with therapists because sometimes they face challenges, burnout challenges, uh, not avoiding clients because of the level of difficulty or the stress that it imposes on them. So yeah, I mean, it's been used outside. It's been involved and used outside that therapeutic context. So the ACT research began in 1981. In 1982, Stephen Hayes at the ABA convention presented on rule-governed behavior and psychopathology. And this led to the first workshop in 1983 on ACT titled Semantic Therapy Cognition, Rule-Governed Behavior and Psychopathology, a Radical Behavior Approach. In 1984, the first article on ACT and RFT, which is the heart of ACT, was published in the journal Behaviorism. And then the first extended presentation on RFT was held in 1985 at the ABA convention. And by 2020, there were over 300 published controlled trials of ACT. And then in 2016, ACT was listed as an empirically supported treatment by Division 12 of the APA, American Psychological Association. Okay. So again, like there's a lot of growing numbers of presentation on ACT. So the ABA International in Lisbon actually has a lot of presentations on ACT this year. And then there's in the past, in 2018, there's the ABA conducted a one-day single event on ACT. Anyway, so this is just a few things that illustrate like the evolvement of ACT. Okay, as ABA. So ACT actually stands for acceptance and commitment therapy. But for the last 20 years, the term acceptance and commitment training has been used in our field. The reason to this is just to distinguish the practical use of the technology in the ABA setting versus a psychotherapy setting or counseling setting. Does that make sense? Yeah. So in ABA, we use ACT as acceptance and commitment training rather than acceptance and commitment therapy. Let's see. Okay, so ACT as ABA is committed to be conceptually systematic, which means that we act needs to abide by the behavior analytic rule of observation and analysis of behaviors in context, um, and design intervention based on functional relationship between behavior and environment. So when we apply ACT in ABA, it's not just merely applying procedures, a technology procedure, right? But we also have to go back to our heart and soul, such as the behavior assessment. What is maintaining the function of the behavior? What are the triggers? So we have to go back to that. What do we want? What are the replacement behaviors? So we still have to use functional assessment and incorporate ACT into that. So like, again, there's many text like workbooks out there on ACT, and it's not just taking that workbook and just doing it. You have to also have context to the ACT intervention that you're going to apply with your client. So like clearly, we have to have training in this field. So in ACT, so attending conferences, reading books, going to workshops, exchanging information with peers, can help provide us more information and more practice into applying ACT. Once the ABA practitioner or the BCBA has a grasp of that concept, they can adapt traditional ACT methods for incorporation into ABA interventions. So I've attended one introductory ACT, but it wasn't ABA based. So if we attend those kind of training, it's not going to be like, they're not going to link it to like behavior terms, right? They're not going to talk about like behavior repertoires. They're not going to talk about establishing operation, but like the technology and the logic behind that, we can take those and translate it into into our ABA intervention. So basically, when I asked my supervisor, so what's the difference between ACT, like in the psychology world, and an ACT in ABA? And she said, it's the same thing. It's just the language is different. And that's what she said. And then, once we have our feet in the water, and we can create even our own, like modified ACT procedures, like, again, like, with ABA, with the contingencies, with the simple technology as reinforcement, shaping, prompting. We can also like develop our own similar ACT procedures. Oh, I made a mistake. Sorry. So what's important for the ABA practitioners, not Anna, ABA practitioner, is to implement ACT functionally rather than simply implementing procedures as a technology. Next slide. Do you have any questions before I move on?
Not yet.
Okay. Not yet. All right. So now we're going to talk about the ACT model. So again, like ACT aims to achieve psychological flexibility, right?
Wait, I actually do. Sorry. I was wondering, is it because you've also received guidance from your boss? I've always been wondering if ACT is like a form of cognitive behavior therapy. Is it?
I'm not too familiar with cognitive behavior therapy, but what my boss was saying is that cognitive behavior therapy is trying to change your mindset, where ACT is not. What ACT is that problems happen, these thoughts happen, these perspective happens, but they're just there. So it's learning to accept these and moving on, because the core of ACT is sort of like, we cannot always change everything. Like problems in life, some of them we can change and some of them we don't have control. So for those that we don't have control, stressing over it, it's not going to solve any problem, right? So we just have to accept it. So a good way of explaining that is there's this procedure in ACT where it goes through mindfulness. So it's sort of like a meditation. And then the speaker would guide the trainee through like what's present, like to close your eyes, pay attention to what's the surrounding, what do you hear, and then be in that happy place. Imagine yourself in this in a place where you feel calm, and then imagine like you're by the river and you see leaves passing by, and these leaves are problems. What are those problems? So take a look at them and let it go. So that's ACT. Whereas it's not changing like, the mind. I hope that helps. Also read The Happiness Trap. That actually makes sense also. Have you heard about that book? The Happiness Trap? Yeah. So it's by Russ Harris. Anyway, so what happiness trap is that we think that we always have to be happy, whereas life is not like that. There are moments that we're happy and there's moments that we're sad and frustrated and anxious. These are feelings, they're going to happen, but it's being aware of them, letting it go, and within that moment where we face these challenges, we are able to guide ourselves to commit to a course of action that will make a course of action that's positive and not negative. So instead of like, you know, uh, I'm I I'm bad at this. I'm gonna fail. When we perseverate on that, it doesn't help, right? But if we learn to look at it, hey, you know what? I suck at this. But maybe it's just now. Tomorrow will be different. So it's a different kind of it's more positive. It's a bit like when we look at ACT, it's very complex. It's it requires us to expose ourselves. Sorry, did you say something? Oh, okay. I heard you. Anyways, yeah. So it's like one sitting, reading one article is not going to be enough. You've got to expose yourself to the books, to lectures, to you know um any source, and then it's kind of like make sense one at a time with it. Anyway, so to move on, um, so ACT consists of 6 behavior repertoires, and they call it the ACT hexaflex. Hexaflex, yeah. So it's acceptance, diffusion, present moment attention, self as context, values, and committed action. So look at these 6 6 dimensions as behavior repertoires that a BCA would be building when they do ACT with their clients. Next slide, June. Okay, so we can go to the next one. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So this is the 6 behavior repertoire, or the hexaflex. As you can see, like there's the acceptance, diffusion, self-as contact, committed action, values, and being able, having these skills when we face challenging moments, it provides us with this flexibility. Like we don't become like so adamant, rule governed that, oh, this is the way it's going to be. This is the world is going to end. You know, it's so having like skill in these 6 areas will help with developing that flexible psychological flexibility. Next slide. Okay, so we're going one by one to explore these these dimensions. And one of the dimension mentioned earlier is values, right? So what are values? values are rules and that function as verbal motivating operation and increase or decrease the effectiveness of a stimuli as reinforcer or punishers, thereby supporting the behavior that produces the stimuli. So, for example, a parent faces challenges in consistently taking behavior data. And they say that it's too hard. My life is spinning like a spinning wheel. It's just too difficult. I can't do it. I'm too busy. It's just, I just don't have the time. I don't have the capacity. I don't, so a lot of barriers, thought barriers put in that. So we can help touch base on what their value is. So let's say if the parent's value is, I care about being a strong advocate for my son. So we can use that value to shape the parent's behavior to take data by explaining to them that, like, if you take data, that gives me a lot of evidence to write in my report so that I can propose more funding to support his needs, right? So I've done that with a parent and actually worked, and support workers, but I also had to, in that process, I also had to meet halfway with them in the sense that I have to help them out, which is like, I can't give them narrative ABC data. There's no way that they're going to fill that out. So instead, I had to do like a QR code with just frequency of behaviors. That's it. But it's better than nothing. So when we want to look into the values, we do like a value assessment, right? We ask parents, like, what are the three most important things for you? What is it as a family? What values do you uphold as a family? Is it respect? Sorry, respect or safety, something like that. So if they say the value that the parent has is safety for the family, so like when like functional communication, how can you use that value to increase the parent's cooperation to do functional communication, right? You can say that, look, when we're out in the one of your families value is safety, and it's a very important thing. Of course, we have to protect our child by teaching our child by teaching X to engage in functional communication. That will be a step for him to reach that safety, because how can you be safe in the community if you can't communicate with others? If you can't tell them your name, if you can't tell them your parents, how can they contact, or needs? Maybe there's something going on, that's, they could be like overwhelmed and engaging in maladaptive behavior because there's something in the environment that's stressing them out and causes danger for the person, for the client, and for others. If the person can communicate that, then we know what his needs are. We can fulfill it and make him feel safe. So it's a lot of that talk kind of thing. Yeah, a lot of it's not talk therapy, but it's not talk therapy, but more like reasoning, talk rationale, I guess.
It's more like buying in and persuading
Yeah.
the parents, right?
Yes, in the context of parent training. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so is this the next one? Okay, the next value, the next dimension we'll talk about is present moment attention. So this one is the one that's referred to as mindfulness or present moment awareness. So it's being in the now and not jumping in the past and jumping in the future, but you focus on what there is at this moment. It involves strengthening one's repertoire of attending to stimuli in the present moment while weakening one's repertoire of attending to one's own verbal behavior in response to the past, future, or imagined events. So sometimes we'll be like in this moment, but then we'll be thinking, like sort of like when I'm salat, it's sometimes my mind races 5 years ahead, or it goes back again. Like, oh, what did I do wrong in therapy? Like, how could I improve? But I'm actually praying, so it's sort of like, hey, you go back, come back, and you're praying right now. So it's pulling ourselves into the moment. It increases sensitivity to environment contingencies and weaken unhelpful sources of verbal stimulus control. In practice, it involves evoking and reinforcing attention to different aspects of immediate experience. One of the remember the ACT procedure or the example that I gave before, the mindfulness one, where you kind of like you close your eyes, you sort of meditate, and the speaker will guide you through the process of right now, what is it that you see, what do you feel on your skin. So that's the kind of practice that's focusing on the now. So the purpose of training an individual to be present in the moment is to facilitate contact with overt environmental stimuli. So let's say, for example, in the context of parent training, it could be like being aware that your child is trying to mand, maybe with whinging, maybe with some gesture, or maybe minor or precursor behavior, right? So being aware of that in the environment sets the stage for like, what's my next action? But because of history where the child's needs are not being met, it's followed by tantrums, it's followed by meltdown, right? And when parents go through these meltdown, they could feel anxious, right? They could feel anxious, they could feel guilty, I don't know, mix of emotions. So what ACT tries to do with this is that pay attention to your child, be aware of your child's need. Yes, when you are aware of that, what's the behavior that I should be engaged in? It's the functional communication, instead of avoiding the situation because I feel like he's going to go into a tantrum. I'm already flustered. I'm anxiety. So the behavior doesn't even happen, but then the parent's anxiety has already increased. So it focuses again, like when we focus on the now, there's something that we can do about it. And yeah. Okay, next slide. Any questions with this one? The next dimension or hexaflex is acceptance. So acceptance can be thought of as approaching behavior in the presence of aversive stimuli, creating a context far more varied and potentially more adaptive behaviors to occur, and then contact natural reinforcers. Basically, what it is that it's accepting the situation. It is what it is. Yeah. It involves weakening the rule-governed negative reinforced repertoire by directing or evoking and reinforcing the ability to approach previous aversive events. So what it's saying is that it's just pretty much like acknowledging the problem, it exists, and just like sort of, and when you accept things, that is the first step, right? How can we change behaviors if a person doesn't accept the situation? Like how can, like, let's go, how can I improve my son's quality of life if I don't accept that he can't talk? And if he can't talk, I can still do something about it. I can teach him lamp instead of like, do you have parents that is very adamant that the child must speak, right? It's like the only way because it's the norm. And and they haven't accepted the child's capacity or their skill level. But when they do accept that situation, then that's the step that we can take to help the child, right? So everything always it starts with acceptance. Um, I'll just read a bit of the example here. Um, so in parent training, this is BCBA, not the parent. So in parent training, the BCBA can model this acceptance by saying, using their own experience, say, I know I'm supposed to be the expert, but honestly, doing extinction is really hard for me. And it's a stand that I'm willing to take for your child. So it's acknowledging like, okay, I'm not the expert, but I'm going to try this because, it's going to benefit your kid. The BCPA can directly reinforce the parent's acceptance behavior by creating a supportive context for parents to choose difficult actions and then directly reinforce when they demonstrate that action. So in this particular situation, the parent can say, I can see that this is frightening for you. You may be worried about getting it wrong. How about we run the extinction procedure together today? We're in this together. So we're providing that support. Any questions on acceptance? Next one. Okay, diffusion. So diffusion, in a nutshell, it's just stopping the thought from happening, like from getting worse. So it's about teaching people to notice that teaching people to notice their private events for what they really are, which is just more stimuli in the environment, and that's it. Thoughts are thoughts. It aims to it's weakening of overly rigid, rule-controlled, overt behavior, such as other functions can come to bear. It, like I said before, it seeks to disrupt narrow, inflexible functions of the person's private verbal stimuli, the thoughts, so that a broader, more flexible repertoire of responding to those thoughts as private stimuli might be established. So training diffusion can occur anytime that the thoughts dominate attention, producing unworkable pattern of behavior. Like, say, for example, I'm going to fail. Or let's say my my son is he's not gonna succeed. He's never gonna grow up. Like those kind of negative thoughts, we have to stop it. My negative thought, my son's going there. Oh my God, he's gonna face so many challenges. Oh my God, there's gonna be problems at immigration. Oh my God, he's not gonna find a house. That's all the negative thoughts. So those are what we have to stop and redirect. So basically, that's what diffusion is. Next one, Ji-un. Okay, so this one is self as context. So self as context describes awareness of oneself as the context for one's all experience. They don't make words very practical, don't they? So it is what self as context is that it's looking it's honestly, I haven't gotten to this part yet in practice, so I'm not going to be very good at explaining this, but I will do it to the best of my ability. So self as context describe awareness of oneself as the context for one's all experience. Behavior analytically, self as context can be looked as a flexible perspective taking repertoire. Self as contact procedures involve shaping flexible, self directed verbal behavior in the presence of private events that vary across time, place, and person. Um, creating self as contact anytime, creating self as contact anytime rules about the self, such as a person's role, relationship, or characteristic, limit flexibility and hinder value directed over behavior. I think the next slide will give more practical reasoning. If you could just go to the next one. Okay, so for example, an example of this would be a student being disruptive in the classroom, but then he describes himself as a class clown. So instead, so we teach the child to consider different ways he might describe himself in different situations or at different times. Teach the child different ways teach the child different ways others in his life might describe him based on what they see. So looking at himself, the person from different perspective, so that he's not very rigid on his own. Next. Okay, this is the last one. Committed action. And this is the ultimate goal of ACT. So what I find that was interesting is that when we go, like when you sit with kids and you go all these like theoretical things, these, sit down and you go these worksheets and talk about all this, they're so good at it. They know the right thing to say. But when it's time to do it, they don't do it. So it's when we use ACT, like when we talk about like emotions and the thought process, things like that, they have to be like, again, one, contextual and meaningful, followed by an action. So what is the action? So let's say, for example, let's say for a parent, the action would be taking data, right? But that behavior has to be reinforced. So the principle of reinforcement has to be tied into this. So with one of my kids, we go through this ACT procedures activity. There's an activity book I wanted to share with you guys for kids. It's very structured, but within every steps, I find like the parents came up to me and says like the child is still engaging in anger. When she's angry, she throws a tantrum, she throws things and screams and yells for 1 hour. It's still happening despite like talking about emotions, how meaningful they are, being aware of your emotion. It doesn't they said that it's not healthy. So okay, all right, fine. Okay. So then I have to think about, okay, what is your family's value? They said that, well, we want our children to be respectful and kind. Okay. So then I took out a bunch of cards. And then these are cards that just like, it's sort of like, one says like, I'm going to write a note to your neighbor, a kind note to your neighbor, help someone out, or throw out the garbage, help clean up the car in the back, or say one nice thing a day to someone, right? So those are like behaviors that can that is in alignment with kindness and respect. So I picked out, like I gave that to the parents, pick three, but you have to pick three that is accomplishable and where we can reinforce. We don't want to start with something that's very hard, because then we won't be able to reinforce it. And when a child can't contact that reinforcement, it's like a learned helplessness. What's the point of doing it? I'm not going to reach it anyways, right? So I find like that strategy, the shaping, the reinforcement, helps tie these helps tie committed action into that whole big picture. The reinforcement is that if every time like the child exhibits one of those three, they get 1 point. At the end of 2 weeks, the next visit, so I visit them fortnightly. So at the next visit, they can go into my treasure box and pick out something. So when the parent said that the next time we met, like, oh my God, they are really they're really very motivated with incentive. They've gotten 22 points for in 2 weeks. And I said, like, okay, so with children, we have to tie in tangible reinforcement because intrinsic motivation is not, they're not there yet. So like respect, value, respect. So values can be motivating operation, right? So let's say perseverance or love, kindness, those are values that some people have, and they're the motivation that 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 takes that guide or evokes our behavior, right? To engage in positive behavior or have you, that's going to be aligned with that goal. But with children, it's not there yet. So a lot of the time I have to, like when I do the act, I have to let parents know that we have to still reinforce them with tangibles at this age, but always pair it with that, with that the praise, so that they can build that confidence and they can, feel good about themselves. So, and then from there, as they grow up, then intrinsic motivation can be more useful. I'm deviating, sorry. But yeah, I think it's a bit, it's tied to this section about committed action. So again, like once a behavior is determined, it's demonstrated, it has to be reinforced. Next slide, June. Okay, so combining the 6 processes. Again, I'm stating here that the act purpose is to build behavior flexibility and psychological flexibility through strengthening the 6 skill repertoires that we just talked about. Now, each skill or each behavior repertoire in ACT is equally important, but each may not require equal attention at any given time. Meaning that you have all that six dimensions, right? They're all important, but when we do our assessment, the person may be already accepting, but he's hasn't have troubles with diffusion, or has trouble with being in the now, or maybe he's very good with being in the now, but then he's not good at accepting. So again, like before we do ACT, we do our functional assessment, right? We look at the behavior, but we also like probe our clients through those 6 hexaflex. Yeah. Any questions?
Is there a tool for that?
What?
Is there a tool for that?
You have to explore maybe some of the you have to explore maybe some of the books, or you can just try to do it yourself. So let's say, for example, like when we talk about value with one of my kids, high functioning, very smart, clever, born engineer, but when I ask him about values, he doesn't know. He doesn't know the meaning. He would start, his face would get red, and then he would fluster, and then I can tell that he's escalating, and he would say, I don't know. So that would be like, okay, that's one area. So say, for example, like, when you build rapport with somebody, you talk, right? Again, you talk with that person, you kind of explore, hey, what are the 3 things that are important for you? Like my thing that's important for me is adventure. I have to have adventure in my life. That's the most important value for me. and then they would share theirs, or they they may say, I don't know.
Mhm.
So
I mean, like for all the, I know it can't be the same for all the individuals, but can there be a protocol or procedure to probe those 6 areas, 6 skill repertoires in
I haven't
advance?
I
No.
haven't come across it. But
Mm-hmm.
again, there's so much act book out there.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to explore. I haven't encountered it. But I would just use just like through conversation, through activities, you can actually tell. So let's say if you go back to, can I see the hexaflex again? The diagram?
Sure.
Okay. So when you look at that, we discuss values, right? So like acceptance, let's say for example, like when you're playing a game with a child, right? Use natural environment observation. So let's say an interaction within the NET context. So let's say for example, you're playing a game and then the person would go bonkers if they lost the game. That's has to do with acceptance, right? Yeah. So is he good at accepting that? Is he good at accepting like you're not going to be the first? Are you good? Are you accepting of the fact that like sometimes kids have difficulty receiving feedback? They get upset when you correct their work. That could be an indicator of that acceptance area. Um, with
Yeah,
this,
so maybe I think so. So I guess while we don't have this particular tool that is made especially for that, maybe we
Mhm.
do just like an ABC data, and then we can code it like acceptance 1 or 0, like whatever it is, acceptance and attention to the present moment. And so I don't know. I guess we can code it and get like a number that way.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. That's just an idea, an idea I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it's hard to like. I think like Felicia, if you have that, I would be more than happy to trial it out. But what I do is that I don't have a structured way, but like I would tell the parents that I need time to build rapport because for me, okay, so the core of, not the core, in order for ACT to work is that the person would have to be willing to communicate with you, right? So if the child is not willing to communicate, sorry, let me just let out the dog. Ethan, can you take Kano out? Yeah, I can take him out. Thank you. Where was I saying? Sorry, do apologize. Um, what was I saying, June?
You were saying, I don't know. What were you saying?
I know it has to do with the client. I know it's like, oh, yes. So in order for ACT to work, the client has to be able to communicate, right? Verbally, or else we won't know what's going on, what's troubling them, right? Um, but it's not as easy to share your experience or not as easy to share your emotions. One, because maybe they don't understand emotions, right? Or two, they want to present themselves as a good like a good person, a respectful person, like masking. They mask a lot, at home they the behaviors come out, but outside it doesn't happen. In the school, it doesn't happen in the community, it doesn't happen in therapeutic setting. So they're masking their emotions. So again, the first thing that we have to build is trust, right? So as you're building trust, it's building rapport, right? So when you do your rapport, like Felicia says, write down, like, do your ABC data when you're interacting. pay attention to the person. How is the person interacting with you? Um, is he all about himself? Is she like, for example, one of mine would say really, I don't know, like smart ass things, like and let's say, for example, like if I talk to them like, hey, do you ever clean up your bedroom? No, why should I do that? It's the parents' job, not mine. So you can, from there, you can kind of see that how far are they going to be committed to doing something, right? Because they're already resisting. There's a lot of escape behavior. So escape behavior also can be an indicator of that area committed action, right? It's very, like, again, it's hard to explain. You just kind of have to go with it. Sometimes you don't always get it. You don't always get the perfect assessment, but just go along with it. And then, like, I would recommend, when you understand like some part of this, go with that workbook. It's Act for Children, if I'm not mistaken, if your clients are children.
So would understanding it this way be the right path? So you need to observe the client, build rapport, observe the client. You
Mhm.
have the six areas,
Mhm.
that six skills that the client has to build repertoire.
Mhm.
There are the big definitions, but in order to apply them to your client, you need to actually then refine it to have an operational definition, so
Yeah.
that it has to be individualized in the end,
Yeah.
like in every
Yeah.
ABA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, like taking ACT, like when we look at ACT, as the slide before mentioned, is that we need to look at it in context. What is in accordance to the function of the behavior. What behavior do you want to change versus just doing ACT, you know, based on the technology. Like, oh, this is how you should do it. Oh, this is how you should do it. So sometimes, like in some situations, maybe self-as context may not be appropriate. It's not applicable. So that's okay then, because we've got like other things, maybe aligning values with present moment and accepting and committed action might be the thing, but we don't, but the person doesn't have like very strong private events that's just very rigid. They could still be flexible. So maybe diffusion is not really important, because if you go to the slide before on making it all work, down all the way down. Yes, combining the six process there. So if you look at that slide, it says that there's a section that says that each behavior repertoire may not be equally uh, not important, but not doesn't require equal attention, which means that maybe with this client it's it could be just value and committed action. With another client, it could be another different uh, dimension that's more applicable. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining myself well. Um, so next slide. Okay. So I think, like, once we get ACT figured out, ACT training figured out, and how it can fit contextually, we also have to apply ACT and always remember the 7 dimensions of the ABA. We have to make sure that ACT is applied in behavioral, that it's targeting socially significant significant overt behavior. And we have to make sure that ACT is effective, producing overt behavior changes that is large enough to produce a meaningful improvement in the learner's life. We have to make sure that it's conceptually systematic, based, guided by behavior principles. We have to make sure that it is generalizable. And then we have to make sure that it's analytical. We have to see what component of ACT, or what if the ACT procedures are responsible for these changes. And we also have to make sure that ACT is technological, that it can be replicated with different clients. So yeah, I think that's just the commitment when we want to do ACT, just to go back to that dimension. And these are just a couple of things. The article mentioned that ACT should include functional assessment, rule-governed behavior, motivating operation. It should include self-management. There has to be goal setting. It still needs to be client preference, and there has to be social validity when we do ACT. We include modeling. So again, in some of the examples, we may be modeling the behavior, like with our own experience and our own chain of positive thoughts. And then, just using, sorry? And then just using single case experimental design. So one client at a time or multiple baseline. So what's hard is, I find with ACT, what's hard is the data taking. Unless we have a specific goal, because again, like how we're so used to DTT, everything's repetition, right? Get it correct for 3 consecutive sessions and then you pass. So with higher cognitive children, level 1s, if we do that, it can be boring. So let's say, for example, let's identify your emotion that you struggle with every day. So one session, the person's open to it. The next session, I do that again. It just doesn't make sense. So I think what's hard is the data, but at some point, the data, what I rely on the data is the points. Like with this client, it's the points they earned. So if the points increase, that means they are engaging in more emotional regulation. Parents were saying, and parents anecdotal, that, she's not escalating, but she's in the yellow zone, but she's not escalating. So that's great, because before she would go all the way to a meltdown. So that's my data. It's the stars that they get from the parents. And yeah.
I have a quick question. In a previous slide, you talk a little bit about functional analysis. Is
Assessment?
Sorry, functional assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So is this the same, doing a NISCA and then an FA?
Yep. So when we see a client, what's the first thing that we do? We do our assessment, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that ACT is appropriate unless we do an assessment, right? On so when you do your ISCA also covers what is the language capacity, what is the behavior that the child. So the 3 most concerning behaviors. So let's say, for example, if it's aggression, right? What is the aggression maintained by? It's maintained by like denied access, right? So if it's like that, if it's very simple, the contingencies there, then it's like we don't need ACT. We can just do um accepting no training, right? With alternatives. We could do that, right? But let's say, for example, some of the behaviors, like with, I find like with the kids that I do ACT with, it's more complex in a sense that the like they want to have friends, right? But in order to, so they at school they want to have friends. They present themselves as, you know, like as this person, this cool person. Um, but in the process of that, in social interaction, sometimes the child's self-confidence gets beaten down by their friends. Or, you know, like kids are very nasty. They're not nasty, but then sometimes they're mean. They're meaner than before, I think. So they would say things that would hurt a person feeling. So in a day setting, all that social stimuli builds up, and then when they mask it, when they get home, it explodes. So like in that kind of example, that's where I find ACT can be helpful, because it's managing those emotions. What are these emotions that you feel every day? So it could be anxiety also. They go through anxiety a lot at school, like changes in routine, things like that. So when we
Sorry,
have,
I'm still not getting how like an FA is helpful in terms of doing ACT.
sorry,
I'm still not I'm still not getting how a functional assessment.
it's not, it's gimana ya? When you look at functional assessment, you can see like what I'm trying to do with those two examples is just one has a very direct contingency, right? It's the trigger is right there in the environment. It's at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the other one, the trigger is a buildup.
Okay, sorry. So how does a
How does an FA, when
yeah,
you do when you do the ISCA, when you talk to parents, they'll give you that information.
you can kind of get like the temperature on their whatever it is, acceptance values. Is that what you're trying to get to?
No. Like when you
No.
do a functional assessment, you look at the behavior.
Right.
First of all, what you in ACT, what you want to change, the ultimate goal to change is the behavior, right?
Uh-huh.
So in order to know what the behavior is and what's the maintaining variable, you have to
Yep.
do an functional assessment, right? Yeah. So when you do the functional assessment, you can see, you do your observation, you do the parent interview, you do the ISCA. What you can see is that, oh, it's very clear the contingency one with one client, the contingency is clear. Denied access behavior,
Yeah.
right? With another child, let's say, for example, you have the parent, you're observing that the trigger is not direct because they don't respond to the trigger, they're masking. So it's a buildup. So which of the two clients is appropriate for ACT?
Oh, so you're doing a functional assessment to determine whether or not a child is appropriate for ACT. Oh.
Exactly. So you, from that process, you can see whether ACT is appropriate. So ACT is not always appropriate for every
Mm,
client. You
okay.
have to look at the appropriacy. That's what I mean by when you look at the functional assessment.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So like when we have clients do the functional assessment, do your, you know, your rapport building, your interaction, your observation, then you find out what the behavior is, you find out what the trigger is. So with that two scenarios that I give you, is it appropriate or not to do ACT, or is it just as simple as accepting no training? Yeah. So if it's as simple as accepting no training, then why go through ACT? So I think like with ACT, it just has more emotions involved in it. And that emotional buildup is that event, is the setting event that will occasion the problematic behavior to occur. It's complex. Have you guys like have you like read literatures, or have you tried doing ACT before in practice?
Yeah,
Like even a little bit?
in college, I mean in grad school, we read about ACT and Fryman and Stephen Hayes and Hayes and Brownstein, and I tried that a little bit. I mean, I think I know enough to be dangerous, which means that I don't really know much about ACT. But I can talk about it like I know about it, but it's a little dangerous for me to do it just because I don't know much about it. So I tried a little bit of that in terms of like like the values and the diffusion and the acceptance, right? Like negative self-talk leads to anxiety and depression for me. So try to, while that is true, while I didn't do well on XYZ, it is also true that I did well on ABC, things like that. So I tried
Hmm.
that a little bit, but I know enough to be dangerous. Which, that
I
I don't.
mean, I felt that way also. I felt that way also when I did it. So like again, I didn't jump into practicing ACT immediately. So it's more like exploration for me, and then the need for it came. So I don't like, in order for me to help a client, um, I need to up my skill. I need to force myself into ACT. But what is the safe way of doing ACT? Because one thing we don't want to go, it's not about like going deep into like their problems and exploring their problems, like how counseling is. It's not that. It's more like, what is the problem? And okay, so let's say for example, like I don't know, Felicia, give me a problem.
I mean, the only thing that I know about that is appropriate, well, a lot, like about like anxiety and depression. I think those are like a very dangerous pitfalls of verbal behavior, right?
Oh, no, no, I don't touch those. So when
Uh,
you do ACT, you also look, because there's ACT for depression, there's ACT for suicide, there's ACT for that. So you have to be comfortable which context also. It doesn't mean you do everything. Like again, this is where the ABA comes in, is that we do ACT where we have the skill, right? Where we have the skill to do, like say for example, parent training can be an area that we touch base all the time, right? Parents resistance, parents, they don't, or a therapist, let's say a therapist is not performing with a client, what's going on, have a chat with them, see what their thoughts are, like I don't know, it's like when I see the client, I get so anxious because of the aggressive behaviors, right? And I'm just thinking that I'm going to get hit. So that thinking like that before the behavior happens is not very helpful, right? So that's something that you can use for use ACT towards, let's say. All right, so yes, so So in that, so this is your problem. This is that you are that you're facing, that you have anxiety when when you face sorry, a client with challenging behaviors. All right, so I'm going to help you out with this. Okay, let's first talk about values. Why are you here in the first place? Because I want to help people out. Okay, so that is a good value that that you have. Um, and when you face these challenges with clients, think about your value. Think about that you're there to help them. What are when when you face this client, have that perspective in mind that I want to help him, right? Okay, so that's one of the values, like the buy-in, right? And then you move on to like other things like like a committed action. Okay, so what can we do with this? How can I help you with this? How can should we do a debrief, a pre-briefing before this client? Would that help you out? Um, okay, well, let's give it a shot. Okay, so we're going to get you prepared for this. And when when the behavior does occur, follow the behavior procedures, right? So instead of panicking, take a step back, quickly read your behavior procedure. Or if it's very hard to look at the BSP on paper, let's put it up on the wall. This is what you do in any emergency or any behavior. You step back, give space, or like give the, like if it's so bad, give the person what they need. Just stop the behavior first. And then we have to talk about it, talk to your behavior analyst on like the skill building part. So that's where kind of like it gets infused into that sort of training with the staff that you can use. So like
For me,
Mhm.
I've also read some journals about ACT before, but
Mhm.
the thing about ACT that blocked me from getting further with it is that I feel like I'm used to the precise ABA stuff things, and it feels more like the counseling part, because my thesis was also on mindfulness, and then it was about counseling education. And then though you said like to use it in ABA, we try to differentiate it by saying it's a acceptance and commitment training.
Mhm.
The concept is still blurry for me in my head. I don't know how to use it. So if I were to apply it to my clients, I think from what I've heard today, I think what I'll do first is I would try to apply it to myself first, because even that would be very difficult. I think the concept of the ACT, it's even hard for neurotypical people, like
It's
emotional
yeah.
regulation part, and then to see yourself as a third party person. So you have to um, see you in an objective perspective also, right? That was one part of the repertoire, right? So
Mm.
those kind of things, I think it requires very much um, self-objectification, which people might not be able to do in their own skills. So that also requires some skill building before we can do the whole acceptance and commitment training. So
Just go back to the behavior, like the code of conduct. The code of conduct says that if you're not competent in a particular area, then you either gain a lot of experience, gain your knowledge, or you don't do it or refer it to someone else.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, 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 of course.
um, but like again, I put my foot into ACT in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, again, it's not like 1 year and then I get to know it. I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't going to do ACT, but I wanted to spend several years like knowing it and maybe like see what I'm comfortable with. So like right now with not all of my kids, like I have very high function like level 1 intelligent people, but ACT is not important, not appropriate for them. But I have a little child that, say for example, I have a little child, a client too actually, that is appropriate for me to do ACT. And then but I follow a workbook. So understanding the concept, but then following that workbook helps for me. It's very hard to, because like ACT was developed, I think, for, if I'm not mistaken, it's for adults, teenager the minimum. But now there's books that can actually help translate those ACT into child activity that will gear towards that way.
Please let me know the name of the book. I think I'm interested.
ACT for children, if I'm saying, hold on 1 second, let me just grab it real quick. Hold on. Here. So it's very child friendly. So like awareness, right? Acceptance, accepting that you have feelings. Like this is addressed in the first activity, which is feelings that you would like help with, right? So sometimes I don't always say like, okay, tell me 3 feelings that you want me to help with, but I would word it like, can you tell me 3 feelings that you often experience almost every day? And it's like it can be bothering. It's not and it's uncomfortable. So then they would color in which feelings. So that's your assessment also, right? What
Yeah.
area that they need help with. Then from there, let's say, for example, anger. All right. So then you have this ruler. It's like a thermometer from 1 to 10. So they would say, like, what is like this anger? How important is that? Or how severe is it? Like how, and they would say like it is an 8 or a 5. I don't know. And then you do this, which is your ABC. Yeah. So you discuss, like, once you have rapport with the child trusts you, because if they don't trust you, they're not going to say anything, right? Then you talk about, okay, so what are, like, let's talk about anger. What are things that makes you angry? And then they can give you examples of it, what's happening in their mind. So what's happening in their mind, where does it happen? So with this is also an assessment. It's an activity, but it's also assessment, but because you can see what the trigger is, maybe there's a pattern, and then where does it occur most? So when I do this with my kids, it turns out that a lot of these feelings occur at school, the social triggers, right? But then the overt behavior, the challenging behavior doesn't appear at school, it appears at home, because that's where they can let go of everything, because it's a safe place. Nobody's going to be judged. I'm always going to be loved, no matter if I'm I'm doing, I'm engaging in positive behavior or challenging behaviors. Then from there, so sorry, they talk about like, what does your feeling look like? Just draw your feelings. So they're like communicating, and then from there you can also kind of see sometimes they surprise you what they draw. My one time I did where does your feeling occur, like your body map. It was so interesting that the child has said, like, when I'm angry, I feel it in my head, I feel it in my hand and my foot. And then I said, like, oh, that's very interesting. Like, why does that happen in your hand and your foot? Well, I just feel like kicking and hitting the person. It's yeah. So I think like this book, have a look at that book, because I think this is like, it's a good guidance. It's a good activity for the child to engage in the acceptance, some form of acceptance, some form of awareness, but it's also an assessment. From there, you can actually
I think I really want to buy it. You better take a picture of it and send it to
sure,
me.
sure. Yeah, bole. I'll send it in the group. Yeah. With values, um, I don't do this with young children because I think values is still very complex for them. But like maybe with school age kids, I do when I want to get their commitment. Remember with ACT, we want to change overt behavior that's in alignment with their values, right? I'll use this one, sorry. So what it is that sometimes like, what's your value? I don't know. Okay, well, here, let's take out all these cards. Now we're going to sort them into important and not important, right? So let's say they sort it. This is important. This is not important. Out of the important, pick 3 most important that we want to commit to. And that's your values that you're going to align the behavior with.
I do values a lot for my young kiddos. Well, they're typically developing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, especially since the school that I lead is a, it's a school that's based on religious belief. So I think ACT can be done. I mean, even for young kids, to understand more of their, just learn the tool before they need it. I think it's really cool as well. Why do you need to learn it once you have gotten, anxiety and depression, right? The social emotional skills needs to happen pretty soon. I think I'm really excited to get the book.
I'll pho- I'll take a picture. I'll send it to you now. I'll send it to the group.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing is just explore different books. Like, look, ACT is a different world, I think. And for me also, it doesn't make sense. I don't want to do ACT in an area where I'm not competent in depression, suicide. I don't do that. But if it's just like anger management because of, social triggers or not getting what you want or, being jealous of your sister, those are areas that I feel more confident in. So,
So also, sorry. So I know
mhm,
talking about ACT, but I guess elements of social emotional skills. There are lots of resources that can also that are free from when I was in at Vanderbilt. I was a research assistant at a lab, and they one of the projects that they were doing was social emotional frameworks for young children. And so there's a website called ncpm challengingbehavior.org. So lots of, I mean, if you're just talking about hurt feelings and being jealous and how to manage those big feelings, that website might work pretty well as well.
Yep, yep, yep. I think
Can
like
you also put that on our chat, please?
Yeah,
did
yeah.
I put it?
No.
Oh,
Felicia, can you
oh,
put that website on the chat also?
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah. There's plenty of books. There's another one that I'm reading. It's like I'm not bad. I'm just angry. Something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't read it yet.
Have you all heard about Ross Green? I like that one as well. Oh shoot, the title Explosive Child. The title is Explosive Child, and the framework is called collaborative proactive solution. Collaborative proactive solutions. And so people in the non-ABA world, people in the in more progressive schools, a lot of them abide by this book or this framework,
Mm-hmm.
collaborative and proactive solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like all these, these tools and frameworks requires a lot of verbal behavior, right? So I like that, I clarify that, we can use the FA, the functional assessment, to make sure we know our organism, whether or not act or this more of this like metacognition skills are more appropriate, or do our kids need more appropriate, functional communication, and get the reinforcer right then and there, kind of thing, instead of like, well, what do you think? What do you think is the problem? And collaboratively trying to come up with a solution.
Yeah, yeah. The other one also, I think that's based on ACT also is called Superflex. Have you heard about that?
Mm-mm.
So like I only briefly read the like the introduction part because I couldn't find like it wasn't appropriate for my kids because of uh their preference and then their like this I guess like the what they're experiencing for lack of a better word. But so it's for like kids like they're into superheroes, right? So the superhero is Hexaflex, and he's the one, the flexible person. And he encounters some bad guys, and these bad guys is like one is rigidity, one is I don't know, like there's several of them, but then that's that concrete thinker. There's the space invader, So I think like it's the superhero facing all these, but and then I think like I haven't gotten far with it, but I think it's like more like how that superhero, which is the child, will deal with when they face that villain. So I think that's a fun way, like, but like again, it you have to look at the individual to see if it's motivating enough for them or not.
That's cool. I send it to me. I love it.
I don't have the books in the clinic. When I go to the clinic, on Monday remind me to take a picture of it, then I can send it. It's like a whole curriculum.
Oh, I love it.
But I think that might be a good. I think my hunch is that one might be a good proactive one rather than this, because with this one it's contextual. The problem has to exist.
Mm. Okay.
But with the other one, it could be like, like hypothetical situations and stuff like that. Like I think like when we do proactive approaches with these kind of procedures, it's more like we give them hypothetical situations, right? Situation that they may encounter in the future, and this is what you can do. But with the act, it has to be like it has to be there, the problem.